How did I miss this? Samuel muttered, staring at the paper taped to the fridge. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Samuel Hayes, 82 years old and as sharp as the crisp winter air, held a crumpled piece of paper in his trembling hand. It was a notice, a scheduled visit from a nursing home representative. The bold letters at the top read Eldercare Solutions. He adjusted his glasses, his dark, weathered hands gripping the counter. The words blurred, but the intention was clear enough. His daughter, Maya, had set this up. His own Maya, the girl he had adopted when she was just a scared 7-year-old standing in the foster care hallway, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The betrayal stung. She thinks I'm useless, he whispered to no one, his voice a cocktail of anger and heartbreak. For years, Samuel had prided himself on his independence. Sure, his knees ached on rainy days, and the stairs seemed steeper than they used to be, but he managed. The thought of a nursing home felt like an erasure of everything he'd fought to hold on to. His dignity, his memories, his home. The front door creaked open, and Maya walked in, carrying bags of groceries. She was in her late 30s now, with the same determined expression she'd worn since childhood. "Dad, why didn't you answer your phone?" "I called twice," she said, setting the bags on the counter. Samuel turned to face her, holding up the notice. "What's this, Maya?" Her face froze for a second, then softened. "Dad, I was going to talk to you about that." "Talk to me? Or just ship me off without a second thought?" His voice rose, startling even himself. Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's not like that. You've been falling a lot lately. I'm worried about you, and I thought... You thought I'd be better off in some place where strangers decide what I eat and when I sleep?" Samuel interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I raised you to be stronger than this, Maya, to fight for what matters." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "And I'm fighting for you, Dad. You think this is easy for me? Watching you struggle every day? She stopped mid-sentence, her voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you." Samuel's chest tightened. The pain in her voice was undeniable, but it didn't soften his resolve. He set the paper on the counter and looked her straight in the eye. "We're not done talking about this, Maya. Not by a long shot." As she nodded, Samuel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was more than just betrayal. Maybe it was a conversation they both needed to have. A reckoning with love, fear, and the future. What's behind Maya's decision, and can Samuel find a way to prove he's still capable of living on his own? Where are you watching from? Have you ever witnessed such a scene? If it were you, what would you do? Please publicly comment my opinion. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel to see more tomorrow. "Dad, you don't see what I see every day," Maya said, her voice trembling. Later that evening, the silence between Samuel and Maya was as heavy as the scent of the chicken soup simmering on the stove. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the dim light from the overhead lamp casting long shadows. Samuel had calmed down, but his heart was still aching with doubt. Maya took a deep breath, folding her hands on the table. "Dad, can we talk? Really talk?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, his weathered face a mask of cautious curiosity. "Go on," he said, his tone measured. "I know this isn't what you want to hear," she began, "but you're not as steady as you used to be. Last month, when you tripped over the rug, I thought..." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. Samuel frowned. "It was just a stumble, Maya. I've stumbled plenty in my life and gotten right back up. But what if next time you don't?" she snapped, her frustration spilling over. "What if I come home and find you hurt, or worse?" The words hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. He saw the fear in her eyes, a fear born not of disrespect or pity, but love. "I'm not helpless," he said softly. "I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I don't need anyone to baby me." Maya shook her head. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not trying to take away your independence. I'm trying to make sure you're safe." "Safe," Samuel repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. "You think a nursing home is safer than the house I've lived in for 40 years? This is where your mother and I raised you, where we laughed, cried, and made a life. You want me to leave all that behind?" Maya's face softened. I know what this house means to you. But, Dad, it's not just about you anymore. It's about me too. He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Maya hesitated, her fingers nervously tapping the table. Do you know how hard it is to juggle work, take care of my kids, and still worry about whether you've eaten or taken your medication? I'm trying my best, but it's exhausting. Samuel's shoulders slumped. He hadn't realized the weight Maya had been carrying. I never wanted to be a burden to you, he said quietly. You're not a burden, Maya replied firmly. But I'm only human. I need help, Dad. And the nursing home, well, I thought it might be the best option for both of us. The room fell silent again, the only sound the gentle bubbling of the soup. Samuel's mind raced. He didn't want to leave his home, but he couldn't ignore Maya's pain. Finally, he said, Give me time, Maya. Let me prove to you, and to myself, that I can still take care of things here. If I can't, we'll talk about other options. Together. Maya studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. Okay, Dad, but promise me you'll be honest with yourself. No more pretending everything's fine when it's not. I promise, Samuel said, though his voice wavered. As Maya got up to check on the soup, Samuel felt a flicker of determination. He wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Sometimes proving your strength isn't about what you've done. It's about what you're willing to do. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the modest house as Samuel stood at the front door, watching Maya drive away. She had agreed to give him a week, just 7 days to show her that he could still manage his life without help. The pressure sat heavily on his chest, but Samuel was determined. He shuffled back inside, the house unnervingly quiet without Maya bustling around. Her words from the previous night echoed in his mind. He glanced at the clock. 8:15, he muttered. Plenty of time to get things done. First on his list was the backyard garden, which had fallen into neglect over the past few months. Samuel grabbed his old gardening gloves, a sun-faded hat, and his trusty shovel, heading outside with a mix of purpose and hesitation. The garden was a mess. Weeds tangled among the rows of vegetables he and his late wife had once tended so lovingly. The sight filled him with guilt. You let this place go, Sam, he whispered to himself. He knelt on one knee, the ache in his joints a sharp reminder of the years gone by. As he pulled the first weed, he felt a twinge in his back, but ignored it. One weed turned into 2, then 10. The rhythm of the work was soothing, almost meditative, until he overreached for a stubborn root and lost his balance, landing hard on his side. Damn it, Samuel cursed, struggling to sit up. His pride stung more than his body. After a few moments of rest, he forced himself back to his feet. His resolve hardened. A fall isn't going to stop me, he said aloud, brushing the dirt off his pants. By noon, the garden looked much better, though Samuel was drenched in sweat and his hands ached. He straightened up, wincing as his back protested. One task down, he said, his voice tinged with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Inside the house, the kitchen was next. Samuel knew Maya worried about his eating habits. Determined to prove her wrong, he pulled out a cookbook she had given him years ago, flipping through its worn pages. Chicken pot pie, he decided. Cooking had always been his wife's domain, but Samuel was no stranger to the basics. He gathered ingredients, double-checking the measurements, and set to work. As the smell of butter and chicken filled the air, a faint smile crept across his face. An hour later, he pulled the bubbling dish from the oven. It wasn't perfect, some of the crust had burned, but it was his. He sat down to eat, savoring the first bite with pride. By evening, Samuel was exhausted. His muscles ached, and his eyelids felt heavy, but his spirit was buoyed by a sense of accomplishment. He had done it, managed a full day without help. As he sank into his recliner, the phone rang. Hi, Dad, Maya's voice greeted him on the other end. How was your day? Samuel hesitated, unsure whether to share the fall in the garden or the burnt crust on the pie. It was fine, he said finally. Productive. I'm glad to hear that, Maya replied, relief evident in her tone. But, Dad, you don't have to push yourself too hard. It's okay to ask for help. Samuel tightened his grip on the receiver. I'm not pushing myself, Maya. I'm proving that I can still handle things. Okay, she said softly. Good night, Dad. Good night, sweetheart. As Samuel hung up, he leaned back in his chair, gazing at the garden through the window. He knew the week ahead would test him even more, but he welcomed the challenge. Samuel has proven he can still manage a day on his own, but can he sustain it? What challenges will tomorrow bring? Stay tuned to see how far Samuel's determination can take him. Strength doesn't mean shutting others out. It's knowing when to let them in. Samuel awoke to the sound of a knock at the door. The sunlight streaming through the curtains told him it was already mid-morning. His body protested as he shuffled toward the door, each step reminding him of yesterday's exertions. When he opened it, a tall man in a crisp suit stood on the porch, holding a leather briefcase. His neatly trimmed beard and polished shoes screamed importance. "Mr. Samuel Thompson?" the man asked, his voice firm but polite. "Who's asking?" Samuel replied, instinctively suspicious. "My name is Eric Daniels. I work with the McAllister Nursing and Rehabilitation Center." Samuel's heart sank. He gripped the doorframe tightly. "You're wasting your time, son. I'm not going anywhere." Eric raised a hand, palm out, in a calming gesture. "I understand your concern, Mr. Thompson. I'm not here to pressure you into anything. I just wanted to drop off some information and answer any questions you might have." Samuel scowled. "I don't have any questions because I'm not interested. Good day." He moved to close the door, but Eric's voice stopped him. "Mr. Thompson, I'm only here because your daughter cares about you." Samuel froze. The words stung more than he wanted to admit. After a moment's pause, he opened the door wider but said nothing. Taking the gesture as permission, Eric stepped inside. His gaze swept over the house, lingering on the photos on the mantel. Samuel in his Navy uniform, a younger Maya in her graduation cap, and one of the entire family at a barbecue long ago. "This is a lovely home," Eric said, setting the briefcase on the coffee table. "I can see why you'd want to stay." Samuel crossed his arms. "Get to the point." Eric nodded, opening the briefcase to pull out a few glossy brochures. McAllister isn't just a nursing home. It's a community. We offer independent living options, with your own apartment and access to 24-hour assistance if you ever need it. It's about giving people the freedom to live on their own terms, safely. Samuel glanced at the brochures but didn't pick them up. "And what makes you think I can't live safely here?" Eric hesitated, then leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, it's not about what you can't do. It's about making things easier, giving you a chance to enjoy life without the burdens of day-to-day upkeep." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I fought in a war, son. I raised a family. I've handled plenty of burdens just fine." "I believe you," Eric replied. "But times change, needs change, and there's no shame in adapting to that." For a moment, the two men stared at each other, the room thick with tension. Finally, Samuel exhaled heavily and gestured toward the door. "I'll think about it," he said, though the words tasted bitter. Eric smiled and handed him the brochures. "That's all I ask. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thompson." After Eric left, Samuel sat in his recliner, the brochures lying untouched on the coffee table. He couldn't shake the feeling that the visit was more than just routine. Maya had set this up, and her intentions, though well-meaning, felt like a betrayal. Still, Eric's words lingered in his mind. "It's not about what you can't do." Samuel stood abruptly, as if moving would shake off the thought. He decided to focus on something productive and headed to the garage. The old toolbox sat in its usual corner, covered in a fine layer of dust. He grabbed a wrench and got to work tightening the loose hinges on the kitchen cabinets, then moved on to fixing the broken step on the back porch. With each completed task, a sense of satisfaction replaced the gnawing doubts. That evening, Maya called again. "How's it going, Dad?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Busy," he replied curtly. There was a pause. "I heard Eric stopped by," she said cautiously. Samuel's grip on the phone tightened. "I don't need some stranger telling me how to live my life." "Dad," Maya began, but Samuel cut her off. "I'm not angry, Maya. I know you mean well, but I'm not ready to give up my independence. Not yet." "I understand," she said softly. But just promise me you'll keep an open mind, okay? Samuel didn't answer immediately. Finally, he sighed. I promise. As he hung up, Samuel stared at the brochures again. He didn't want to admit it, but a small part of him wondered if Eric had been right. Samuel's fight to keep his independence has only just begun, but can he prove to Maya and himself that he doesn't need help? And what happens if his determination leads him to take on more than he can handle? Stay tuned for the next chapter of Samuel's journey. Sometimes, proving yourself means confronting the limits you refuse to see. The next morning, Samuel woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The brochures from Eric Daniels sat on the coffee table, mocking him with their glossy promises of convenience and community. He resolved to prove to himself and to Maya that he wasn't ready to surrender his independence. Pulling on his work boots, Samuel decided to tackle the backyard, a part of the house he'd neglected in recent years. Overgrown weeds and unruly hedges sprawled like a rebellion against time. His old lawnmower sat in the shed, dusty and silent, as though it, too, doubted his resolve. Time to show you who's boss, Samuel muttered as he dragged the mower into the sunlight. The first pull of the cord brought a sputtering cough from the machine. Samuel cursed under his breath and tried again. Nothing. On the fourth try, the mower roared to life, but Samuel's arms ached from the effort. Undeterred, he pushed it toward the unruly lawn, the smell of gasoline and grass filling the air. Sweat dripped down his brow as he worked in the midday sun. Each step felt like a small victory, the blades chewing through the defiant grass. Samuel ignored the growing strain in his back and the sharp twinges in his knees. By the time he finished, the lawn was neat, the hedges trimmed, and the garden revived. Samuel stood back to admire his work, pride swelling in his chest. That evening, Maya stopped by unannounced, carrying a casserole dish. She found her father in the recliner, his legs propped up and an ice pack on his knee. "What happened to you?" she asked, setting the dish on the kitchen counter. Samuel waved her off. "Nothing I can't handle." Maya glanced out the window at the freshly manicured lawn. "You did all that today?" "Someone has to keep this place in shape," Samuel replied, his tone defensive. "Dad," Maya sat down across from him, her face a mix of admiration and concern. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I know you're capable." "It's not about proving anything to you," Samuel shot back. "It's about proving it to myself." Maya's expression softened. "And what if you push yourself too hard? What if you get hurt?" Samuel looked away, the weight of her words pressing on him. He hated the idea of being seen as fragile, but deep down, he couldn't deny that his body was no longer as reliable as his mind wanted it to be. "I'm not ready to quit," he said finally. "I'm not asking you to quit," Maya replied. "I'm asking you to let me help. We're a team, remember?" Her words struck a chord. Samuel remembered the times he'd taught her to ride a bike, fixed her scraped knees, and cheered her on at every milestone. Letting her help now felt like reversing roles, a bitter pill to swallow. That night, as Samuel lay in bed, his body aching from the day's labor, he thought about Maya's words. Was accepting help really a sign of weakness, or could it be something else? He stared at the ceiling, the question lingering in his mind until sleep finally claimed him. Samuel's determination has earned him pride, but at what cost? Can he balance his need for independence with the reality of his limitations? Or will his stubbornness lead to greater challenges ahead? Keep reading to find out what happens next. Some wounds are invisible, buried beneath layers of time, waiting to resurface. The following day, Samuel was jolted from his sleep by a knock at the door. Rubbing the stiffness from his eyes, he shuffled to the front door, his cane clicking against the hardwood floor. Standing on the porch was a tall man in his late 40s, dressed in a tailored gray suit that seemed too formal for the quiet neighborhood. His face was vaguely familiar, though Samuel couldn't immediately place him. "Mr. Samuel Hayes?" the man asked, extending a hand. "That's me," Samuel replied, his brow furrowed. "And you are?" "Michael Thomas," the man said, his handshake firm. "I served with you in the 3rd Infantry Division. Korea." The memories hit Samuel like a tidal wave. Decades had passed since those days of camaraderie and survival, but some faces lingered in his mind. Michael had been just a boy back then, barely old enough to enlist. Michael Thomas? Samuel repeated, stepping back to take in the man before him. I'll be damned. Come in, son. Chapter 6. A Visit from the Past. Some wounds are invisible, buried beneath layers of time, waiting to resurface. The following day, Samuel was jolted from his sleep by a knock at the door. Rubbing the stiffness from his eyes, he shuffled to the front door, his cane clicking against the hardwood floor. Standing on the porch was a tall man in his late 40s, dressed in a tailored gray suit that seemed too formal for the quiet neighborhood. His face was vaguely familiar, though Samuel couldn't immediately place him. "Mr. Samuel Hayes?" the man asked, extending a hand. "That's me," Samuel replied, his brow furrowed. "And you are?" "Michael Thomas," the man said, his handshake firm. "I served with you in the 3rd Infantry Division. Korea." The memories hit Samuel like a tidal wave. Decades had passed since those days of camaraderie and survival, but some faces lingered in his mind. Michael had been just a boy back then, barely old enough to enlist. "Michael Thomas?" Samuel repeated, stepping back to take in the man before him. "I'll be damned. Come in, son." Inside, Michael's presence brought a buzz of energy to the small house. Over cups of black coffee, the two men exchanged stories, each word peeling back layers of history. "I found your address through an old friend," Michael explained. "I heard about some of the things you've been through lately. Thought I'd check in." Samuel chuckled dryly. "Word travels fast, huh?" "People remember those who made a difference," Michael said earnestly. "You always had a way of keeping us steady, even when things got rough. I owe a lot of my survival to you." The words touched Samuel in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd long since buried the war in the back of his mind, thinking of it only in moments of solitude. Hearing that his actions had left an impact reminded him of the strength he once carried. As the conversation continued, Michael's tone shifted. "I hear your daughter's been looking out for you. That's good to see." Samuel's expression tightened. "She's got it in her head that I need babysitting." "Maybe she's just trying to honor what you've taught her," Michael said, his voice gentle. Samuel leaned back in his chair, the weight of the past few days pressing on him. Michael's visit was a reminder of the respect he'd earned, but it also underscored the changes he was facing. Before leaving, Michael stood at the door and turned to Samuel. "You're still a fighter, Mr. Hayes. That hasn't changed. But even the best fighters know when to call for reinforcements." The words lingered after Michael left. Samuel stared out the window, watching the leaves sway in the wind. For years, he'd been the rock in everyone's life, steady, unyielding. Now, he wondered if leaning on others didn't mean losing that strength, but sharing it. Samuel's encounter with Michael has stirred memories and emotions he thought he'd put to rest. But can a visit from the past help him confront the challenges of the present? Or will his pride continue to stand in the way? Stay tuned as Samuel's journey unfolds. Sometimes, life's answers arrive unbidden, scribbled in ink and sealed with care. The day after Michael's visit, Samuel awoke with a heaviness in his chest. Sleep had been elusive, filled with fragmented dreams of long-forgotten battlefields and the laughter of men who were now either shadows or ghosts. As he sat down with his morning coffee, a soft thud startled him. A letter slipped through the mail slot. He glanced at it with disinterest at first, assuming it was another bill or piece of junk mail. But when he picked it up, his name on the envelope caught his attention. The handwriting was delicate but firm, the kind that spoke of intention behind each stroke. He turned it over and saw no return address. His curiosity piqued. Samuel reached for his letter opener, slicing through the seal with precision. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, folded neatly in thirds. The first line made his breath hitch. "Dear Dad." It wasn't signed by Cynthia. The handwriting was different, and the content was unexpected. "I know it's been years since I've reached out, but I couldn't let another day pass without trying to make amends. I've thought about you often, more than I can admit without shame. Leaving wasn't easy, and staying away has been even harder. But I need you to know that it was never about not loving you. It was about finding a way to love myself." Samuel's hands trembled as he read further. He knew who this was from, even without a signature. His adopted daughter, Erica, the one who'd left home 20 years ago, severing ties with both him and Cynthia. I heard from Cynthia about what you've been going through, and I want to help if you'll let me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope for a chance to reconnect. Please let me know if that's something you'd consider. The letter ended with a phone number and an address scribbled at the bottom. Samuel sat back in his chair, his heart racing. He hadn't spoken Erica's name aloud in 2 decades. The pain of her departure had been so profound that he'd buried it, focusing instead on raising Cynthia and making peace with what he couldn't change. By the time Cynthia arrived to check on him later that morning, the letter was still on the table. "What's that?" she asked, noticing his distant expression. Samuel hesitated before sliding the letter toward her. "Take a look." Cynthia read it in silence, her eyes widening. When she finished, she placed it back on the table with deliberate care. "I didn't know she'd reach out to you," she said softly. "You've been in touch with her?" Samuel's voice was sharp, laced with an emotion he couldn't name. "Only recently," Cynthia admitted. "She called me a few weeks ago. Said she wanted to make things right. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure how you'd take it." "How should I take it?" Samuel asked, his voice trembling with both anger and longing. "I think you should give her a chance," Cynthia said. "For both your sakes." Samuel sat in silence long after Cynthia left. The letter, now creased from his trembling grip, felt heavier than its weight in paper. His heart warred with his mind. He was still angry at the years lost, at the pain her absence had caused. But beneath the anger was something deeper. Hope. Hope that perhaps this letter wasn't just a reminder of the past, but a bridge to a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Erica's letter has stirred a storm of emotions within Samuel. Will he reach out to her and risk reopening old wounds, or will he bury the past once again? And what role will Cynthia play in mending the broken pieces of their family? The answers await in the next chapter. Sometimes, the hardest step forward is turning back to face where it all began. Samuel sat in his recliner, the letter still in his hands, staring at the phone on the table. The numbers at the bottom of Erica's letter were etched into his mind, as if they had been seared there. Each ring of the clock brought him closer to a decision he wasn't sure he was ready to make. After hours of wrestling with himself, Samuel finally reached for the phone. His calloused fingers dialed the number slowly, as though each press of the button was a test of his resolve. The line rang twice before a soft voice answered. "Hello?" "Erica," Samuel said, his voice gravelly. "It's your father." There was silence on the other end, a silence so profound that Samuel thought the call had dropped. Then came the sound of a shaky breath. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. I didn't think you'd call." "Well, I did," Samuel replied, a hint of the old stubbornness returning to his tone. "You wrote me a letter. Figured I owed you that much." The conversation started awkwardly, filled with stammered apologies and long pauses. Erica explained why she'd left, a mixture of youthful rebellion and the weight of her own insecurities. She admitted that she had felt overwhelmed growing up, trying to live up to the expectations of a man she had always admired but felt she couldn't measure up to. Samuel listened, his jaw tight, but his silence spoke volumes. "And then, when I wanted to come back, it felt too late," Erica continued, her voice trembling. "The longer I stayed away, the harder it was to reach out. I was ashamed." "You should have come anyway," Samuel said, his voice softer now. "You were always my daughter. Always." They talked for over an hour, unpacking years of pain and misunderstanding. By the end of the call, there was no clear resolution. But there was something else, a promise to meet. "She lives nearby," Samuel told Cynthia later that evening. "I'm going to see her tomorrow." Cynthia nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm proud of you, Dad." The next morning, Samuel dressed with more care than usual, choosing a crisp button-down shirt and his best slacks. Cynthia drove him to the address Erica had provided, a modest apartment complex on the other side of town. As they pulled into the lot, Samuel's heart pounded. He spotted Erica waiting near the entrance, her figure both familiar and unfamiliar. She looked older, of course, but there was something about her posture, the way she clasped her hands nervously, that reminded him of the little girl he'd once taught to ride a bike. "Dad," Erica said softly as he approached. "Erica," Samuel replied, his voice steady but thick with emotion. They stood there for a moment, neither knowing quite what to do. Then, tentatively, Erica reached out and hugged him. Samuel stiffened at first, but then his arms came around her, and years of unspoken pain seemed to dissolve in that embrace. Inside her apartment, they talked more, this time face to face. Erica showed him photos of her life, her career, her friends, the small family she had built for herself. Samuel listened intently, occasionally offering a gruff comment or a nod of approval. As the visit came to an end, Erica hesitated. "I don't expect everything to be perfect between us overnight," she said, "but I'd like to try, if you're willing." Samuel looked at her, his eyes softer than they had been in years. "It's never too late to try," he said. As Samuel begins to rebuild his relationship with Erica, old wounds are reopened, but so are opportunities for healing. Will their fragile connection withstand the weight of their shared past? And how will Cynthia react as the family dynamics begin to shift? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Forgiveness isn't just for the other person. It's the key to unlocking your own peace. Samuel spent the next few days in a quiet daze, reflecting on the unexpected reunion with Erica. Her embrace had shaken him more than he cared to admit, stirring up emotions he thought he had buried long ago. The old man had spent most of his life carrying his pride like armor, but it had never shielded him from the ache of loss. Now, after so many years, there was a chance, however fragile, to rebuild what had been broken. He sat in his recliner, staring at the framed photo of Erica he kept on his mantle. She was just a little girl in that picture, the image of her innocence captured in a moment of happiness. He couldn't help but wonder if he had failed her in ways that had shaped the woman she had become. The thoughts gnawed at him, sharp and persistent. "Dad?" Cynthia's voice pulled him from his reverie. He looked up to find her standing in the doorway, her expression gentle but knowing. "You've been quiet these last few days." Samuel let out a heavy sigh, lowering his gaze to his hands. "I've been thinking about her, about us. I don't know if I can forgive myself for how it all turned out." Cynthia crossed the room and sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about letting go of the weight of it." Samuel gave a small shake of his head, as though the words didn't quite settle. "I don't know how to let go." "Well," she said softly, "you don't have to do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time." The next day, Erica called again. There was a lightness in her voice, something that had been missing during their first conversation. "Dad," she said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about trying. I think we should take it slow, but maybe we could start with lunch? I'd like to spend some time with you, just the two of us, no pressure." The invitation made Samuel's heart flutter with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He hadn't shared a meal with Erica in over a decade. Could they really make something meaningful from the years that had passed? He didn't have the answer, but he knew that he couldn't let the opportunity slip away. "Yes," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'd like that." Lunch was quiet at first. The small cafe Erica had chosen was a far cry from the grand restaurants Samuel was accustomed to, but it felt more authentic, more real. They sat across from each other, the remnants of their last encounter still hanging between them like an unspoken truce. "I didn't know where to start," Erica confessed, breaking the silence. "I've spent so many years running from this, from you, from the hurt I felt." Samuel nodded. "I understand. I wasn't easy to reach, was I?" Erica smiled faintly. "You weren't easy to love either." The words stung, but Samuel didn't flinch. He had spent a lifetime protecting his pride, but this time, he allowed the truth to settle in. The raw honesty between them felt like a bridge, fragile, but with the potential to hold them together. They spent the afternoon talking, delving into the details of their past, the things that had hurt them both, the misunderstandings that had festered for so long. There was laughter too, as memories resurfaced, some sweet, others painful, but all part of their shared history. Samuel found himself surprised at how easily the conversation flowed once the walls between them began to crumble. By the time they finished lunch, the distance that had once seemed insurmountable felt smaller. Samuel didn't know if they could ever fully erase the years between them, but he did know that he had taken the first step toward healing. That night, as he sat in his recliner again, Samuel reflected on the day. He thought about forgiveness, not as an act of absolution, but as a process, a journey. Maybe it was true, as Cynthia had said. Maybe forgiveness was less about excusing the past and more about freeing himself from its grip. Cynthia sat beside him later that evening, her eyes gentle but full of understanding. "How did it go?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence linger as he thought about Erica's smile, the way her eyes had softened when they spoke of old wounds. "It went better than I expected," he said finally, "but I've got a long way to go." Cynthia nodded, squeezing his hand. "We all do." Samuel's journey of forgiveness has only just begun, and the path ahead is uncertain. As the wounds of the past start to heal, will their fragile bonds survive the challenges that lie ahead? What role will Cynthia play as the dynamics between the family members continue to shift? Stay tuned for the next chapter. Sometimes, the truth isn't something you find. It's something that finds you. The weeks following Samuel's lunch with Erica were a blur of uncertainty and quiet optimism. They spoke on the phone regularly now, each conversation a tentative step toward rebuilding what had been lost. But deep down, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking beneath the surface. He had spent so many years locked in his own pain that he hadn't fully understood the scars Erica carried, and now, as they were reconnecting, he found himself questioning just how much damage had been done. The things left unsaid hung like shadows over their fragile peace. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Samuel sat on the porch, his mind consumed by a swirling mix of doubt and longing. Cynthia stepped outside, her presence a calming contrast to the storm of thoughts in his mind. She sat beside him, her face soft with concern. "Something on your mind, Dad?" Samuel hesitated, chewing on the words he had yet to voice. I can't shake the feeling that there's something more. Something Erica isn't telling me." Cynthia's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he said, rubbing his face. "There's just this heaviness. I can't explain it, but it's like she's holding something back. Maybe it's just my old worries catching up with me, but it doesn't feel right." Cynthia didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in a quiet but firm voice, she spoke. "Dad, Erica's been through a lot. It's going to take time for her to open up completely, but you have to trust that she's trying. She's not the same person she was back then." Samuel nodded slowly, but the unease in his chest didn't dissipate. It only seemed to grow, pulsing with each passing day. A few days later, Samuel received a call from Erica. Her voice was shaky, the words tumbling out in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for far too long. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you. Something you need to know." His heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong?" "It's about why I left, why I stayed away for so long," Erica's voice cracked. "And about the things I never had the courage to say to you." Samuel's pulse quickened, a knot tightening in his stomach. "You don't have to explain yourself, Erica. I know I wasn't perfect, but whatever it is, we can work through it." Erica was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her words came out in a whisper. "It wasn't just about me leaving. It was about you, too. I've been holding on to something you need to hear. The truth about why I really left, why I couldn't come back." Samuel felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. He had prepared himself for many things, but not this. Not a truth that he couldn't have imagined. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice strained with confusion. Erica's voice trembled as she continued. "It's about what happened after you brought me home, after everything you promised. It's about what I saw and what I knew. I just couldn't stay. I couldn't trust you." The words hit him like a blow. His chest tightened, and he felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of guilt. He had always believed that his failures were the cause of their estrangement, but now, it seemed there was more to it than he had ever known. "I don't understand," Samuel said, barely able to breathe. I couldn't. I couldn't trust you after what happened, Erica repeated, her voice trembling. And that's why I left. I couldn't forgive you for what you did. The silence between them was deafening. Samuel sat motionless, his mind racing. What had he done? What had he failed to see? Erica's voice broke the silence, softer this time. I didn't know how to tell you, how to make you understand. It was too much. Samuel's heart was heavy, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had thought he had lost her due to his pride, due to his stubbornness. But now, he realized there was more, so much more, that had driven her away. I never knew, Samuel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I never knew you felt that way. Later that night, Samuel couldn't sleep. The revelation echoed in his mind, replaying over and over again. What had he missed? What had he done to betray her trust? He had thought that he was protecting her, that he was doing what was best, but maybe he had been blind to the truth of what she had experienced. As the night wore on, the truth settled in. Samuel hadn't just lost his daughter, he had lost her trust, and rebuilding that trust would be more difficult than he ever imagined. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was still possible. Cynthia sat beside him in the quiet of the night, her presence a reminder of the strength he had carried all these years. Dad, you can't change what happened, but you can decide how to move forward. You've already taken the hardest step, opening up to Erica. Now, you have to be patient. Trust isn't something that comes easily, but it can come back if you let it. Samuel is faced with the painful realization of the depths of Erica's hurt. Can he regain the trust he lost, or is it too late to repair what has been broken? The road to redemption is never easy. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting that you're not the person you used to be. The phone call from Erica had left Samuel rattled, but in a way, it also sparked something in him, a flicker of determination. He had always believed in second chances, both for others and for himself, but now he was faced with the hardest second chance of his life. Not just for himself, but for Erica too. Samuel spent the next few days mulling over the conversation, wrestling with the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. He had always thought that their separation was a consequence of his choices, his stubbornness, but now, the reality hit harder than any revelation he had imagined. Erica's absence hadn't just been about physical distance. It was the emotional wall he had unknowingly built between them, a wall that he now had to tear down piece by piece. He couldn't change the past, but he could make the effort to understand the woman who stood before him, the one who was his daughter, but also a stranger in so many ways. Samuel knew he had to confront the pain she had endured, pain that was rooted in his own actions. But what was that pain, really? What had caused her to leave him all those years ago? And how had he failed her? With each passing day, the burden of those questions weighed heavier on his heart. The phone rang one evening, and for a moment, Samuel froze. He had been waiting for this call, for a sign, for a way forward. His hand trembled as he picked up the receiver, a moment of hesitation before he spoke. Hello? Dad, Erica's voice crackled through the line, tentative yet resolute. I've been thinking. I want to meet. We need to talk, face to face. It's time. Samuel's chest tightened. She wanted to meet. This could be the moment they both had been waiting for, but it also scared him. What if they couldn't bridge the distance that had grown between them? I'll be there, he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions in his chest. Where? Same place, Erica replied. The park. Where we used to go. You know where. Samuel hung up, his mind racing. That park had once been a symbol of happier times, a place where they had shared laughter and quiet moments. Now, it would serve as the place to face everything they had avoided. The next afternoon, Samuel arrived early, hoping to clear his thoughts before the conversation began. The park was quiet, the trees swaying gently in the wind as if the world around him was holding its breath. He sat on the same bench where he had spent countless afternoons watching Erica run and play. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the memories of a time when life seemed simpler and the world felt a little less heavy. He didn't know how much time passed before he heard footsteps approaching. He turned, and there she was, Erica. She stood a few feet away, her posture hesitant but strong, her face a mix of uncertainty and resolve. Time had changed her, but Samuel could still see the little girl he had once known beneath the surface. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Hi, Erica." Samuel stood and took a slow step toward her. "I'm glad you called. I've been waiting for this." She nodded, but there was a wariness in her eyes. She wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. Samuel could see it, and it stung, but he understood. He had to earn her trust again, one step at a time. "Sit down," he said gently, gesturing to the bench. "Let's talk." They both sat, the space between them filled with an unspoken tension. Samuel's heart beat faster as he waited for Erica to speak. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I want you to understand something. I didn't leave because I hated you. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I couldn't trust you anymore. The promises you made to me, the things you said you would do, I kept waiting for them to come true, but they never did." Samuel's breath caught in his throat. He had always assumed he had been a good father to her, but now the truth felt like a slap. His failures had been more than just neglect. They had been broken promises, unspoken fears, and moments where he had let her down without even realizing it. "I didn't know," Samuel whispered, his voice thick with regret. "I didn't know how much I hurt you. I thought I was protecting you, doing what was best, but I failed you. I didn't see it." Erica looked down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but it felt like you didn't see me. You didn't see how much I needed you to be there. I felt invisible, like I was just a burden." Samuel's heart shattered as he listened to her words. He had been blind to her pain, too focused on his own struggles to see the cracks forming in their relationship. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know, but I know now. I want to fix this, Erica. I want to be the father you deserve." Erica's eyes welled up, but she didn't look away. "It's going to take time, Dad. I need time. I don't know if I can trust you right away, but I want to try. I want to see if we can make this work." For the first time in a long time, Samuel felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start, a step toward healing, toward rebuilding something that had been broken long ago. The path to redemption is never easy, but Samuel is beginning to realize that healing can only happen if they take it one day at a time. Will he prove that he can change? Or will the distance between them be too great to bridge? Stay tuned for the next chapter. The hardest part about starting over is realizing that everything you've been through was leading you to this moment. The days that followed the park meeting felt like a slow, fragile rebirth for Samuel. It was as though the conversation with Erica had unlocked something deep within him, a reservoir of emotions he had spent years burying. He had spent decades running from his own mistakes, hoping time would heal everything, but now he knew better. Time didn't heal wounds. Action did. Erica had given him a second chance, but it was a fragile one, and Samuel understood that. He couldn't rush this. He couldn't fix everything with a single gesture, a single apology. He had to show her, through his actions, that he had learned and that he was committed to being the father she needed him to be. Each morning, he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, but also a lingering fear. Was he too late? Could he really change after all these years? Would Erica ever fully trust him again? One evening, as Samuel sat at the kitchen table, his mind drifting to thoughts of Erica, his phone buzzed. He reached for it, his fingers trembling. The caller ID showed Erica's name. He hadn't expected to hear from her so soon. His heart raced as he answered, "Hello? Dad, Her voice was unsteady, and for a moment, Samuel thought she might be upset. "I've been thinking. I want to invite you over. To dinner. It's been a long time. I want to try. I want to see if we can do this. Start fresh." Samuel sat back, his chest tightening. He had no words at first, only a deep breath of relief. "I'd love that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll be there." The next evening, Samuel arrived at Erica's apartment. It was small, but cozy. The smell of home-cooked food wafted through the air, and for a moment, it felt like they had never been apart. Erica was in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot. When she saw him, A small, tentative smile tugged at her lips. "Hey, Dad," she said softly. "I hope you're hungry." Samuel chuckled. "I haven't eaten yet. You cooking all this yourself?" Erica nodded, her hands busy with the food, but there was a calmness in her movements, a sense of control that hadn't been there before. She had grown into herself in ways that Samuel hadn't expected, and for a moment, it made him feel like a stranger. But a good kind of stranger, the kind who had been allowed to step into her life again, even if only for a brief moment. He sat at the table, watching her prepare the meal. It was a simple dinner, nothing extravagant, but it felt meaningful. This wasn't just a meal. It was a bridge, a chance to rebuild the connection they had once had and lost. "So," Samuel began, his voice tentative, "what have you been up to these days? How's work?" Erica set down the spoon, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I've been working a lot, but I'm also trying to focus on things that make me happy now. It's been a process." "You know?" Samuel nodded. He did know. The weight of years spent running away from each other was still there, but they were both trying to heal in their own ways. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other along the way. After dinner, they sat in the living room, sipping coffee. The conversation had flowed more easily than either of them had expected, and the tension from their earlier interactions had melted away. But Samuel knew this wasn't the end of their journey. It was just the beginning. "Dad," Erica said after a long silence, "I want to ask you something. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, that you want to prove yourself, but I need to know if you're really ready to change. I don't want to put myself through all this again if it's just going to be the same." Samuel's heart sank. He had expected this question, but hearing it out loud still felt like a punch to the gut. He had to prove himself. There was no other way around it. His words alone wouldn't be enough. "I am ready," Samuel replied, his voice steady. "I can't change everything overnight, Erica, but I'm here. I'm here, and I want to show you that I can be the father you deserve. I want to be part of your life, no matter how long it takes." Erica studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to read his every word. Finally, she nodded. "I believe you, but don't think it's going to be easy. You have a lot to make up for." "I know," Samuel said, his voice full of determination, "but I'll do whatever it takes." The evening ended quietly, but it felt like a turning point. As Samuel stepped out of Erica's apartment and into the cool night air, he realized that he had no guarantees. Nothing was certain, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about starting over with the understanding that you couldn't change what had happened, but you could change the way you moved forward. Samuel has taken the first step toward rebuilding his relationship with Erica, but the road ahead is still uncertain. Will he prove himself worthy of the second chance he's been given? Stay tuned to see if their healing journey will continue, or if the shadows of the past will prove too difficult to overcome. The past can hurt, but the future is yours to shape. Samuel spent the next few days reflecting on his conversation with Erica, replaying every word in his mind. He knew he had to be patient, but patience had never been his strong suit. He wanted to move forward, to fix everything right now, but he knew that wasn't how healing worked. Every relationship was a process, slow, fragile, and at times painful. The uncertainty of it all kept him up at night. Was this enough? Was his effort really going to change anything? The fear of failure gnawed at him. But even in the quiet of the night, he found a flicker of hope that kept him from giving up. A week passed, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Samuel had been spending more time with Erica, though their meetings were often brief. She was still cautious, understandably so, but each small step forward was a victory. One afternoon, as Samuel sat at home reading a book, his phone rang. The caller ID was Erica's name again. His heart skipped a beat. "Hey, Erica," he answered, trying to keep his voice calm despite the rush of anticipation. "Hi, Dad. I've been thinking," she started, her voice quieter than usual. "I want to try something. I was hoping you'd come with me." Samuel sat up straighter. "What do you mean? What are you thinking?" "I want to go to the park where we used to go when I was a kid. The one with the big oak tree. Do you remember that place?" she asked. The memory flooded back instantly. The park had been their spot, where they had shared simple moments, their bond growing despite the struggles of life. It had been years since he last thought about it. "I remember," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure? I mean, I'd love to, but I don't want to rush things, Erica. We can take our time." "It's not rushing," she said softly. "I just think it's time. We need to start over, right?" Samuel felt a lump form in his throat. He had never imagined that something as simple as a walk in the park could feel so monumental. But there it was, a chance to make new memories, to heal old wounds. "I'll be there," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling within him. Later that day, Samuel met Erica at the park. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the familiar landscape. The oak tree stood tall, just as it always had, a silent witness to the passage of time. Erica stood by the tree, her arms crossed as she gazed up at its branches. When she saw Samuel approach, she gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. But Samuel wasn't expecting perfection. He was just grateful to be there with her. "You've grown," he said quietly, his gaze scanning her face. "So much." "I guess I have," Erica replied with a soft laugh. "It's been a long time, Dad." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past between them. Then Erica took a deep breath and turned to face him. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about being ready to change," she said, her voice more certain now. "I don't expect things to be perfect, but I want you to know that I'm willing to give you a chance. But it's going to take time. I need to see it, not just hear it." "I understand," Samuel said. "I'm ready to prove it, one day at a time." For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they no longer had the power to paralyze him. He was ready to take it slow, to rebuild their relationship brick by brick. As they sat on the grass beneath the oak tree, talking about their lives and their hopes for the future, Samuel realized how much he had taken for granted. The simple moments, like this one, were the ones that mattered the most. He didn't need to fix everything in one go. He just needed to show up, be present, and take responsibility for the things he had done wrong. Later that evening, as Samuel walked back to his car, he felt a strange sense of peace. There was still so much work to be done, so much healing to be had. But he had taken a step, a real step, toward rebuilding the life he had once lost. And for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. There was still time. There was still a chance. With the past still looming in the distance, Samuel's future with Erica is uncertain. But as they continue their journey together, one thing is clear. Redemption isn't found in perfection, but in the willingness to change. Will Samuel be able to fully rebuild the trust that was lost? Or will the ghosts of his past come back to haunt him? Trust is built one day at a time, but it can be broken in an instant. The days following Samuel's visit to the park were filled with cautious optimism. He had done what he thought was impossible. He'd taken the first step toward mending his relationship with Erica. And though the wounds of the past were deep, there was something in the air that felt different this time. A shift, however small, had begun to happen. Samuel spent his days reflecting on the lessons he had learned over the years. Lessons about patience, forgiveness, and the unspoken strength of family. But with each step forward, a new challenge emerged. His past wasn't just something he could walk away from. It would always be a part of him, waiting for moments to test him. One evening, as Samuel was going through some old photo albums, his phone rang again. It was Erica. His heart quickened, but he didn't let his nerves show. He had to be calm. He had to be steady. "Hello?" he answered. "Dad, we need to talk." Erica's voice was serious. "I think we're ready for the next step." Samuel's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I want to invite you over for dinner," she said. "I know it's a big step, but I want us to start building new traditions. I want to move forward, but I also need to know if you're ready." Samuel took a deep breath. The thought of stepping into her home again, of sharing a meal together after all this time, made his chest tighten. He had to admit it. It scared him. What if he made a mistake? What if he said or did something that would push her away again? But he didn't let that fear hold him back. "I'm ready, Erica," he replied. I'm ready for whatever comes next. That evening, Samuel drove to Erica's house with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He knew this was a big moment. Dinner wasn't just about food, it was about trust. About showing Erica that he was committed to being the father she had always needed, even if he hadn't been that person in the past. When he arrived, Erica greeted him with a smile, but her eyes held a cautious look. The kind of look that said she was still unsure, still trying to figure out if this was really going to work. "Come on in," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. The inside of her home was warm and inviting, but there was an emptiness to it. It felt like a space waiting to be filled with memories, new memories, better ones. The living room was cozy, with soft lighting and the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. As they sat at the dinner table, Samuel couldn't help but notice how much Erica had changed. She was no longer the little girl he had once known. She was an adult, a woman with her own life, her own opinions, and that was exactly what he had wanted for her all along. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "how's work? How's everything going for you?" Erica took a deep breath and looked at him. "It's been good. I've been busy, but I'm managing. But you know what? I've been thinking a lot about what you said, the things you want to make up for. And Dad, I need you to understand something." Samuel's stomach nodded. "What is it?" "I'm not going to forgive you overnight. It's going to take time," Erica said, her voice steady. "I can't just forget everything, no matter how much I want to. But what I need from you now is your honesty. No more pretending. No more excuses. Just the truth." Samuel nodded. "I understand. I know it's going to take time. I don't expect anything to be easy. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm really here this time." The conversation continued, and Samuel listened more than he spoke. He let Erica share her thoughts, her fears, and her doubts. There was no defensiveness, no interruption, just a steady, silent promise that he was willing to let her speak freely. After dinner, as they cleaned up together, Erica turned to him with a small smile. "Thanks for coming tonight. It wasn't easy, but we did it. One step at a time, right?" Samuel smiled back. "Yeah, one step at a time." But as he left her house that night, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much to prove. The test had just begun. He had to prove to Erica that he was really there. Not just for a meal, not just for a conversation, but for the long haul. And he had to prove it not just to her, but to himself. That night, as Samuel sat on his porch watching the stars, he realized that he had been given another chance. Not just with Erica, but with life itself. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but it would be worth it. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I'm ready." With every step forward, the bond between Samuel and Erica strengthens, but the past still looms over them. Will Samuel be able to prove that his commitment is real? Or will old wounds resurface, threatening everything they've worked for? Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, but learning to trust again. The weeks that followed Samuel's dinner with Erica felt like a fragile thread, one that could snap at any moment. They had both agreed to take things slowly, but every step felt like a test of their commitment to the future. Samuel knew that this wasn't just about rebuilding their relationship. It was about proving to Erica and to himself that the man he was now was different from the man he had been. Each time he called or visited her, his nerves threatened to undo him. What if he said the wrong thing? What if the past became an obstacle too large to overcome? But Erica, surprisingly, was patient. In some ways, her cautious approach gave him hope. She didn't expect perfection, and that was a gift Samuel hadn't realized he needed until now. One evening, after another quiet conversation over coffee, Erica dropped a bombshell. She was thinking about moving away for work. A significant career opportunity had come up that would take her to another city. The offer was too good to pass up, but it meant leaving behind the fragile beginnings of their renewed relationship. Samuel sat back, his heart sinking. "You're really considering it?" Erica nodded, her eyes searching his face for any sign of disappointment. "I don't want to run away from what we've started. But this is a chance I can't ignore, Dad. I've spent my whole life putting others first. This time, it's my turn." Samuel understood. He had been where she was, standing at a crossroads, torn between duty and desire. And he didn't want to hold her back, but a part of him couldn't ignore the fear that gripped him. What if this distance was the end of everything they had begun to build? Over the next few days, Samuel grappled with his feelings. He didn't want to be selfish, didn't want to ask Erica to give up something for him. But at the same time, the thought of losing her again, of having her so far away, felt like a punch to the gut. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. He decided to do what he had been avoiding. He needed to be honest, completely and utterly honest, with Erica about how he felt. No more walls. No more pretending he was okay when he wasn't. The day before Erica's final decision, Samuel went to her house. He stood at the door for a moment, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He had to be strong. He had to let her make her own choices. But the truth was, he was scared. When Erica answered the door, she looked at him with those familiar eyes, filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Hey, Dad," she said softly. "You okay?" Samuel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I need to talk to you, Erica. About everything." Erica raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Samuel took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I know you're thinking about moving away, and I know you have to do what's best for you. But I need you to know something. I'm scared. I'm scared of losing you again. I'm scared that we've finally started to make progress, and now you're leaving." Erica's face softened, and she stepped closer. "Dad, I'm not leaving because I don't care. I'm leaving because I need to grow, to find myself. But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning you." Samuel's heart clenched. "I know, but I don't know if I'm ready to let go. It feels like I just got you back, and now you're going." There was a long silence between them. Erica reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm not going anywhere for good, Dad. I'll still be here. We'll still talk. We'll still visit. But I have to do this for myself. I can't keep living in the past. We both need to move forward." Samuel looked into her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of peace. Maybe this was the way forward. Maybe the key wasn't to hold on so tightly, but to trust that the bond they had created would survive the distance. "I'm proud of you, Erica," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want you to go. I want you to live your life. But I'm going to be here, waiting for you, no matter what." As Samuel left her house that night, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. Erica was going to follow her dreams, and he would support her, even from a distance. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly letting go. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The road ahead wasn't easy, and it wouldn't always be clear. But Samuel had learned something important that night. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is trust that the people we love will come back, even when we let them go. With Erica's future uncertain, Samuel faces the reality of what it means to truly let go. Will their bond survive the test of time and distance, or will the fear of losing each other forever become too much to bear? Change isn't just a moment. It's a process, a ripple that spreads in unexpected ways. The days following Samuel's heartfelt conversation with Erica felt both lighter and heavier at once. The weight of unspoken fears had been lifted, but now he was left with the uncomfortable silence of possibility. Erica's future seemed more uncertain than ever, and yet Samuel had made peace with her decision, whatever it might be. It was a form of growth he hadn't expected to experience. But even as he accepted her need to move forward, the reality of it still gnawed at him. He couldn't help but wonder what would become of their connection. If distance would pull them apart or strengthen the bond they had been painstakingly rebuilding for so long. One morning, as Samuel sat alone in his living room, sipping his coffee, a knock at the door broke his quiet solitude. It was an unexpected visit, one that would change the course of his day. He opened the door to find an old friend standing there, a familiar face from his past. Marvin, his former colleague from the local community center, had a somber look on his face. "Samuel, it's good to see you," Marvin said, his voice warm, but tinged with concern. Samuel stepped back, motioning for him to come inside. "Marvin, it's been a while. What brings you here?" Marvin hesitated before sitting down, clearly unsure how to begin. "I've been keeping an eye on the center, and I heard something recently that I think you should know. I wanted you to hear it from me first." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Marvin looked him straight in the eye. "There's been talk. People have noticed how much you've changed, how different you've been since Erica came back into your life. And not just you. There's something in the air around here, Samuel. The whole neighborhood feels it." Samuel leaned back, trying to process what his friend was saying. "What do you mean, Marvin?" "I'm saying, man, the ripple effect. It's not just about you and Erica anymore. It's about the community. People are starting to see the way you're reconnecting with your past, with your daughter. They're watching you, and it's inspiring them to make their own changes." A feeling of warmth spread through Samuel's chest. "I never thought about it that way." Marvin smiled. "You've always been a quiet force in this community, Samuel. But now, people are noticing, and it's making them think. Maybe it's time for them to take their own steps. Maybe it's time for all of us to change." That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. The idea of a ripple effect had lodged itself in his mind, spinning around like a whirlpool, drawing him in. The changes he had made in his own life were becoming something bigger, something that stretched far beyond just his relationship with Erica. He had always believed that small acts could bring about change, but this was different. This was a chance to not just change his life, but to inspire others to do the same. The next day, Samuel visited the community center where he had worked for so many years. It had been a part of him since his youth, and even after retirement, he had continued to show up whenever he could. But now, as he walked through the familiar halls, he felt a new energy. The old faces he passed were looking at him with renewed interest, as if they saw something in him that hadn't been there before. He hadn't realized just how much his own transformation had been noticed by the people around him. Marvin had been right. His relationship with Erica was just the beginning of something bigger. It wasn't just a personal journey anymore. Samuel was becoming a symbol of change, a living example of what it meant to heal and grow. Later that week, Samuel found himself standing in front of a small group of young men at the community center. They were all looking at him expectantly, and for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt the weight of responsibility. But instead of feeling burdened, he felt empowered. These young men were searching for something that he could offer. "I know you all have your doubts," he began, his voice steady. "I've had my own. I've faced pain, loss, and regret, just like many of you. But I want you to understand something. You don't have to stay where you are. You can change. You can find your way out of the darkness, just like I did. It's not easy, but it's possible, and I'm here to help you do it." The room was silent, but Samuel could feel the weight of their attention. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't speaking to fill space. He was speaking to make a difference. As he left the community center that afternoon, Samuel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it, finding a message from Erica. It was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had been said between them in recent weeks. "I'm still thinking about the move, Dad, but I want you to know, no matter where I go, I'm carrying what we've built with me. I love you." Samuel smiled as he read the message. His daughter was finding her way, just as he was finding his. The road ahead would be difficult, but it no longer felt so daunting. He had seen the ripple effect in action, and he knew that whatever happened next, he wasn't alone. With the ripple effect gaining momentum in the community, Samuel faces a crossroads of his own. Will he continue to mentor others, and how will he handle the challenges of his own personal growth while supporting Erica's journey? What's next for Samuel, and how will the people he's inspired shape the path ahead? Sometimes, the hardest part isn't letting go. It's trusting that what you've built will stand on its own. As the weeks passed, Samuel found himself more immersed in the rhythm of his newfound purpose. The community center had become his sanctuary, a place where he could pour his wisdom into the lives of young men who, in many ways, reminded him of his own younger self. They came from broken homes, poverty, and circumstances that seemed destined to hold them back. But with every lesson Samuel shared, with every moment of hope he offered, he saw them slowly begin to change. Not just for themselves, but for their families, their communities. But in the midst of all this growth, Samuel still felt the pull of uncertainty when it came to Erica. Her decision was looming, and though he had made peace with whatever choice she would make, There was still a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling of loss. He'd poured so much into her over the years, his love, his time, his hope. And now, as she prepared to embark on her own journey, a part of him was afraid that all of that might be slipping away. One evening, Samuel received a call that caught him off guard. It was Erica. His heart skipped a beat as he answered, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, Dad," Erica's voice was soft, but there was a sense of resolution in it that Samuel hadn't heard before. "I've made my decision." Samuel's breath hitched, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. The silence between them felt thick, heavy with expectation. He had spent so much time trying to prepare himself for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt unprepared. "Okay," he replied gently. "What's your decision?" "I'm going," she said, her voice steady. "I'm moving to the West Coast, Dad. I've got a new job lined up, and I think it's time for me to step into this new chapter of my life." A lump formed in Samuel's throat. He'd expected it, but hearing the words aloud made it all feel so final. "I understand," he said, though a part of him wasn't sure if he really did. "But you know I'm always here for you, right? No matter what happens, you're not alone." "I know, Dad, and I love you. This isn't goodbye. It's just me stepping out to find my own way. But I carry everything you've taught me with me." Samuel felt a mixture of pride and sorrow swell within him. His daughter was finding her own path, and he couldn't hold her back. He had to trust that she was ready, even if his heart ached at the thought of her being so far away. "I'm proud of you, Erica. Always have been, always will be." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Erica's departure had brought with it an emotional flood that Samuel wasn't quite ready to navigate. He found himself at the community center more than usual, working with the young men who looked up to him, seeking solace in the faces of those who needed him. But as much as he tried to bury himself in the work, there were moments of stillness where his thoughts drifted back to Erica. The finality of her decision hit him in waves. He knew that things would never be the same again, and in that truth, he found a certain peace. The night before Erica's departure, Samuel invited her to dinner at his home. It wasn't a grand meal, just something simple, but it was important. It was a moment to say everything that had been left unsaid. They sat at the table, the glow of candlelight flickering between them as they shared stories of the past, laughed about old memories, and spoke of the future. It wasn't a goodbye. It couldn't be. Not when their bond was so strong. "I'm going to miss you," Samuel said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll miss you too, Dad," Erica replied, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But this is what I need. To grow. To become more than what I've been." "I understand. But just promise me one thing," Samuel said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Promise me that you'll never forget where you came from. No matter how far you go, or how high you climb, never forget who you are. You're my daughter, and you carry everything we've built together." "I promise," Erica said, her voice firm. "I'll never forget." The next morning, as Erica packed the last of her things into the car, Samuel stood in the doorway, watching. It was a quiet moment, one that spoke volumes. No grand speeches, no dramatic farewells. Just a shared understanding that this was part of the journey. "I love you, Dad," Erica said, her voice thick with emotion as she closed the door behind her. "I'll call you when I get settled." "I love you too, sweetheart," Samuel replied, watching as she drove away. The house felt empty in her absence, but Samuel knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, for both of them. As he stood there, looking out at the street, he felt a shift inside of him. It was as though everything he had done, every decision he had made, had led him to this moment. He had built something with Erica that couldn't be undone, no matter how far apart they were. And as much as he would miss her, he knew she was ready. She was ready to soar. Samuel smiled softly, feeling the weight of years slip away. He had done his part. Now, it was time for Erica to fly. With Erica's departure, Samuel is left to confront the next phase of his life. What new challenges await him? Will his work with the community continue to grow? And how will he cope with the absence of his daughter? The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Samuel's journey of growth is far from over. The greatest legacy you can leave is not just in what you do for others, but in how you inspire them to do for themselves. Days passed, and Samuel found himself adjusting to the silence in his home. The absence of Erica was tangible, filling the house with a quiet that made everything feel slightly out of place. His routine had shifted, and while he missed her deeply, he knew that the time had come to focus on the things that had once brought him joy. He spent his mornings at the community center, mentoring the young men who came to him for advice. His work there had taken on new meaning. Samuel no longer just shared wisdom. He became the anchor for these young souls, offering them guidance not just in skill but in life. The energy of the community center reminded him of his own struggles as a young man and how far he had come from those days. One afternoon, as he sat on the porch of his house, watching the sun dip low on the horizon, Samuel received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was familiar, though it had been years since they last spoke. "Samuel? It's Robert." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. Robert had been a close friend in his youth, someone he had lost touch with after a series of life events pulled them in different directions. Robert had been like a brother to him back in the day, but life had a way of moving people apart. "Robert?" Samuel's voice trembled slightly with surprise. "It's been a long time. What's going on?" "I know, man," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been meaning to reach out, but, life got in the way. Listen, I heard about your work with the community center. I've been following your progress, and I think I can help." Samuel sat up straighter, the excitement in his chest bubbling as Robert continued. "I've been working with some organizations that want to expand their outreach programs, and I think there's an opportunity for you. They're looking for someone with experience, someone who can lead and inspire. What do you think?" Samuel felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He had spent years building the foundation of the center, focusing on the impact he could make in the lives of these young men. Now, it seemed that the opportunity he'd been waiting for had found him. "I don't know what to say, Robert," Samuel replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "This sounds too good to be true. But I've spent so many years focused on the day-to-day, on what's right in front of me. I'm not sure I'm ready for something on that scale." "You are, Samuel. You've always been ready. You just had to believe in yourself," Robert said with conviction. "This could be your chance to leave a lasting impact, not just in this neighborhood, but beyond." Samuel spent the next few days reflecting on Robert's words. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride in the work he had already done, but at the same time, he realized that perhaps this was his opportunity to do even more. His heart had always been dedicated to the community, to these young men who depended on him for guidance. But this opportunity would allow him to spread that vision further, to reach more lives, to create a legacy of change. He called Erica later that evening, needing to hear her voice, to share this with her. She had always been his sounding board, the one who understood him best. "Hey, Dad," Erica said, her voice bright despite the distance between them. "How's everything going?" "I've been thinking a lot, Erica," Samuel began, his voice laced with uncertainty. "I got a call from an old friend. They're offering me a chance to expand my work. I'm not sure if I should take it or not." Erica was quiet for a moment before responding, her voice full of encouragement. "Dad, I know how much the community means to you. If this is what you've been working for, then it's time to take that next step. I believe in you." Her words gave him the push he needed. Samuel had spent so much of his life building something for others, but now it was time to think about his own future and what he could leave behind. In the weeks that followed, Samuel made the decision to accept the opportunity. He began working with Robert and the organizations to expand the community center's reach, to build a network of support that stretched far beyond what he had ever imagined. The work was challenging, but it was also exhilarating. Samuel felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. He was no longer just a mentor in a small neighborhood. He was becoming a catalyst for change. But as Samuel's world expanded, so did his relationship with Erica. Though miles apart, their bond grew stronger. She sent him updates on her new life on the West Coast, and Samuel found himself more and more excited to hear about her adventures. She was flourishing, finding her own path, and it filled him with pride. One evening, as Samuel stood on the stage of a new community event he had helped organize, He looked out at the faces in the crowd, young men and women from all walks of life. He had made a difference. He had helped them believe in themselves, just as he had believed in Erica. It wasn't just about providing resources. It was about empowering people to see the greatness within themselves. Samuel knew that Erica was right all along. He had always been ready for this. He just needed to take the leap. As Samuel steps into this new phase of his life, the future holds endless possibilities. What impact will he have on a larger scale? How will his connection with Erica continue to shape the path ahead? Samuel's story is far from over, and the greatest chapters are yet to come. A life lived for others is the only life worth living. The months that followed Samuel's decision to expand the community outreach were a whirlwind. He found himself constantly juggling meetings, conference calls, and partnerships with organizations that shared his vision. It was exhausting work, but each step forward reinforced his belief in what he was doing. He was becoming a force for change, and with each success, the community grew stronger. Erica's visits back home became less frequent, but their conversations remained the anchor in his life. She would listen as he recounted his experiences, the victories, and the struggles. It was clear that their connection had only deepened. Though they were apart physically, they were more connected than ever. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, Samuel sat in his favorite chair by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. His phone rang. It was Erica. "Hey, Dad. I have something I need to tell you," she said, her voice full of anticipation. "What's going on, Erica?" Samuel asked, sensing the excitement in her tone. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About you. About everything you've taught me. I've decided I want to start my own project, something to give back to the community, something that's really close to my heart." Samuel's heart swelled with pride. He had always known that Erica had the potential for greatness, but to hear her speak with such conviction about her own dreams was overwhelming. "That's incredible, Erica. What kind of project?" "I'm not sure yet," she replied, "but I want it to be about helping women who have gone through the same struggles I faced growing up. Women who need support, mentorship, and a safe space to heal." Samuel could hear the passion in her voice. It was the same passion he had seen in himself all those years ago, when he first started building the community center. He had given everything to help others, and now Erica was ready to do the same in her own way. "You've got this, Erica," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I believe in you, and I'm proud of you. Whatever you need, I'll be here." In the following weeks, Erica threw herself into her project, her vision taking shape as she connected with other women who shared her commitment to helping others. It wasn't long before she had gathered a group of passionate individuals, all of whom were ready to make a difference in the lives of women who had been marginalized, abused, or overlooked. As Erica's project began to grow, Samuel continued to expand his own efforts. He worked tirelessly to create opportunities for the young men and women in his community, helping them find jobs, pursue education, and build meaningful relationships. He saw himself in many of their faces, the lost, the hopeless, the ones who felt invisible. But through his mentorship, they began to see their potential. And Samuel couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. One evening, after a particularly successful event at the community center, Samuel stood outside, breathing in the cool night air. The sound of laughter and conversation echoed from inside the building. He realized that, despite all the challenges and setbacks, he had made it. The foundation he had built was solid, and it was growing every day. But there was still something missing. Erica's project, now in full swing, had gained a lot of attention, and soon Samuel was invited to speak at one of her events. When the day finally arrived, he felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. It had been a while since he had shared a stage with her, but now it was different. She was the one leading, and he was there to support her. The event was held in a beautiful hall, packed with women who had come to listen to Erica's story. Samuel sat in the back, watching as his daughter took the stage. She spoke with grace and determination, her words resonating with everyone in the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Erica began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "This is not just my story. It's the story of every woman who has ever struggled to find her place in this world. This project is not about me. It's about all of us. It's about creating a space where women can heal, find support, and build the lives they deserve. Samuel's eyes welled up with tears as he watched his daughter speak. This was the legacy he had always hoped for. Someone who would carry the torch and continue the work he had started. But Erica was doing it in her own way, on her own terms. And that was something he could never have imagined in his wildest dreams. After the event, Erica found Samuel standing at the back, watching her with pride. She walked over, her face beaming with joy. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft. Samuel didn't say anything at first. He simply pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to let go. His heart was full, and he knew that whatever the future held, they were both on the right path. "I'm so proud of you, Erica," Samuel finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done it. You've created something incredible." Erica smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You've always been my inspiration." As Samuel walked back to his home later that evening, he reflected on the journey he had been on. From the days of uncertainty, the doubts about his legacy, to this moment, where everything had come full circle. He had started with nothing but a vision, and now, that vision had blossomed into something far greater than he had ever imagined. And through it all, the most important thing he had learned was that the impact we have on others is the truest measure of our success. The ripple effect of his actions, of his sacrifices, of his love, had now extended far beyond what he could have dreamed. It had reached his daughter, and through her, it would continue to touch countless lives. With Erica's project growing, the ripple effect continues. What will happen next for Samuel and Erica as they continue to build legacies of their own? The future is wide open, and both father and daughter are ready to embrace the challenges ahead. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. Albert Einstein. It had been a year since Erica's event, and the success of her project was undeniable. The women's empowerment program she'd founded had blossomed into a thriving initiative, reaching women from all walks of life. From mentorship programs to emotional healing workshops, it had become a beacon of hope in the community, a reflection of her commitment to change. Meanwhile, Samuel's community center had grown too. What started as a modest vision had turned into a thriving hub for young people seeking to redefine their futures. The outreach programs he initiated with local schools had bridged gaps and offered opportunities to those who had once felt forgotten. Yet, despite all the progress, he felt an itch, a longing for something more. It wasn't that he wasn't proud of the work. It was just that he had a sense that his journey wasn't over. One morning, Samuel sat with Erica in the kitchen, drinking coffee as the sun filtered through the window. The air smelled fresh, and everything seemed serene, almost perfect. "You know, I've been thinking," Samuel began, his voice reflective. "About what?" Erica asked, looking up from the papers she was reviewing. "I think it's time for me to take a step back," he said, his tone thoughtful. "I've spent a lifetime building this place, these programs, and now I feel like it's time to hand the torch over to the next generation." Erica put her papers down, a soft frown creasing her brow. "Dad, what are you saying? You've worked so hard to build all of this. You can't just walk away now." "It's not about walking away," Samuel replied. "It's about giving others a chance to lead, to make their mark. And I trust that they will do things better than I ever could." There was a silence between them, as if the weight of Samuel's words had just begun to sink in. "But you've taught me everything I know," Erica said quietly. "You've led by example, and you've inspired so many of us. I wouldn't be doing this without you." Samuel smiled warmly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "And that's the point, Erica. You're ready now. You've grown so much. It's your time." A few weeks later, the transition began. Samuel started to slowly step away from the day-to-day operations, handing more responsibilities to the younger team members. He took on a more advisory role, offering his wisdom and support when needed, but no longer at the helm. It was an emotional experience, watching the place he had built with his own hands continue to grow under new leadership. But there was pride in knowing it was in capable hands. Erica took on a greater role, too. She found herself taking more calls, leading meetings, and making decisions that would shape the future of their community efforts. Yet, she never felt alone. Her father was always there, ready to guide her when she needed advice, but also allowing her to make her own mistakes and learn from them. During one of their talks late one evening, after a successful community event, Samuel looked at his daughter with a deep sense of peace. "You've done it, Erica. You've made this your own." Erica's eyes glistened with tears as she smiled back. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." The years of struggle, sacrifice, and resilience had led them to this point. From the moment he had stepped in to take care of her as a child, to this moment where they both found their purpose in giving back to the world, it had all come full circle. Erica had become the woman he had always hoped she would be, the kind of leader who would continue the work, but in her own, unique way. "I'm proud of you," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of us," Erica corrected. "We did this together." Months passed, and as Samuel settled into his new rhythm, he realized something. Life, though slower now, still held much for him. He began writing the stories of his life, not just for his children, but for the generations that would follow. He'd never been much for reflection, but something had shifted in him. He wanted his legacy to live on in more ways than just the community work. His experiences, his mistakes, and his triumphs were valuable, and they could help others find their own path. Then one afternoon, as he sat in the community center's garden with his old friend Richard, Samuel felt something different stir within him. A sense of fulfillment that went beyond the physical projects, the programs, or the accolades. It was the deep knowledge that he had left an indelible mark on the world, one that would continue through the work Erica had begun. "I think this is it, Richard," Samuel said, looking out over the garden where children were laughing and playing. "I think I've done all I can. It's time to just enjoy what's left." Richard chuckled. "Enjoy it, my friend. You earned it." And Samuel did. He spent his days writing, reflecting, and being with his family. His grandchildren often came to visit, playing in the same spaces he had once built for them. The laughter of young people filled the air, and for the first time, Samuel understood that the ripple effect of his life wasn't just about the work he did. It was about the lives he had touched, the hearts he had shaped, and the community he had built. As Erica's project continued to thrive, Samuel's impact spread even further. His life was a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the strength of a father's bond with his child. And while he had no way of knowing what the future held, one thing was certain. The legacy of his love and guidance would echo through the generations, just as he had hoped. Samuel's journey is far from over. Though he has passed the torch to Erica, what awaits the next generation? And how will the lessons of the past continue to guide them through the challenges ahead? The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Nelson Mandela. Erica stood in the quiet of the community center, looking out over the bustling crowd. It had been a year since her father had officially passed the reins, and the energy in the building was palpable. The walls were adorned with bright murals, reminders of the many lives touched by the work they had done. From young professionals, mothers, and fathers, to those who once felt lost and forgotten, the space had become a beacon of hope. But despite the success, Erica felt a weight pressing on her shoulders. She had big dreams for this place, for the people, for the future. But there was always that lingering doubt, that quiet voice that asked, "Can I truly carry this forward the way he did?" Her father had set such a high bar. His legacy was undeniable, and though she had made strides, she still found herself questioning whether she could be as powerful a force for change as he had been. The day was over, and the last of the youth had trickled out. Erica sat at her desk, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows over the room. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of how to proceed with her next big project, something that would solidify her as the leader her father had raised her to be. There were so many ideas she wanted to bring to life, but it felt like no matter how many times she tried to make them happen, there was always a roadblock, some challenge she hadn't anticipated. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Erica called out. The door creaked open, and Samuel walked in, his gait slow but steady. Though his days of running the center were behind him, he was still as sharp as ever. "How's the day been?" he asked, his voice calm. but there was an edge to it, a sign that he was aware of the weight Erica carried. Erica leaned back in her chair, her eyes scanning the room. Busy, like always. But, I don't know, Dad. I just feel like I'm spinning my wheels sometimes. Like I'm not moving forward, even though everything is going well. I don't want to just maintain this place. I want to grow it, expand it, to make it even more of a legacy. Samuel sat across from her, folding his hands. You're doing great, Erica. You're right where you need to be. But I understand. It's hard to let go of the feeling that you've got to do it all. You think you have to keep pushing, even when it's already successful. But remember, the true measure of success isn't in how fast or far you go. It's in how deeply you impact those you touch. Erica let out a deep breath, resting her head in her hands. I feel like I'm not enough sometimes, though. I'm constantly looking for the next thing, the next project, but it's exhausting. Her father smiled softly, a knowing glimmer in his eyes. Erica, you've already accomplished more than most ever will. But here's the thing. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to find joy in what you've already built. You've laid the groundwork for something that will outlast both of us. Your foundation is solid. Now, take a moment to appreciate the lives you've already changed. There was a quiet moment between them, as Erica's eyes softened, and the weight she had been carrying seemed to lighten, just a little. You've always known what to say, Erica whispered, lifting her gaze to meet her father's. Thank you. Samuel chuckled lightly. I've had years of practice. Later that evening, as Erica left the center, she found herself reflecting on her father's words. She had been so caught up in the future, in the next milestone, that she hadn't taken time to appreciate what they had already accomplished. She had been focused on proving herself, when all along, the true measure of her impact had been sitting right in front of her, waiting to be recognized. Her mind wandered to the people whose lives had been touched by the work they had done. The single mothers who had found support and stability. The young men and women who had found mentors. The families who had learned to heal and rebuild together. It was easy to get lost in the pursuit of growth, but the real magic was in the connections they had already created. She had come to realize that she didn't need to be like her father. She just needed to continue being the best version of herself. The future didn't need to be rushed. She could take her time, build on what was already working, and allow the next step to come naturally. As Erica left the center for the night, the streetlights cast a warm glow on the quiet city. She felt lighter, freer, like the burden of constant ambition had been lifted. It wasn't about being perfect or constantly striving for more. It was about being present, appreciating what had been built, and letting the rest fall into place when it was time. And for the first time in a long while, Erica felt that sense of peace her father had spoken about. She wasn't alone in this journey. She never had been. Together, they had built something that would endure, and she was ready to carry it forward in her own way, one step at a time. Erica has found a new clarity in her path, but what will this new phase look like for the community? What fresh ideas will she bring to life? And how will her journey unfold as she steps into her next role? The best way to predict your future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln. Erica sat at her desk, her fingers tracing the edges of a new blueprint she had been working on for weeks. The community center had come a long way, but Erica knew there was more she could do. The neighborhood had transformed, and the city was beginning to take notice. What once seemed like an uphill battle was now a steady climb toward progress, and Erica was more committed than ever to pushing further. But there was something new on her mind, something that she hadn't considered before. In the past, her goals had been about fixing what was broken, filling the gaps in the community. Now, however, she was thinking about innovation. She wasn't just looking to continue what had been started. She wanted to forge a new path. Her father had always taught her to think beyond what was immediately in front of her, to see the long-term vision. As she stared at the blueprint for the new expansion of the center, she realized this wasn't just about physical space or services. It was about creating a sustainable ecosystem of support. An environment where the community didn't just survive but thrived. Where people didn't only come for help, but also had the tools and opportunities to grow on their own. The phone buzzed on her desk, snapping her back to the present. She answered it without looking, still focused on the plans before her. Erica, it's Samuel. Her father's voice came through clearly. I wanted to talk to you about something. Erica smiled softly. What's up, Dad? I've been thinking, Samuel continued, his tone serious but thoughtful. There's a new development coming in downtown, something about a mixed-use project. They're going to put in apartments, retail spaces, and community amenities. But from what I've heard, they're not really considering the people who need it most. You know, the folks who could benefit from a place like the center, but don't have access to it. Erica listened intently, her mind already turning. She knew where this conversation was going. I'm thinking, Samuel said, maybe it's time we consider being a part of that development. We can't just wait for others to build a community around us. We need to take that step ourselves. Erica leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing with purpose. This was it, the moment her father had been preparing her for. This was the kind of move that could change everything, but it would take vision, risk, and a willingness to push against the system. What are you suggesting? She asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. Samuel's voice dropped slightly, his words weighing heavy. It's time we build our own space. Not just another community center, but something bigger, something that directly meets the needs of the community in a sustainable way. A place that can be a hub for growth, for education, for entrepreneurship. We take the lessons we've learned and create a new model that others can follow. Erica felt her heart race. This was it. This could be the breakthrough they needed to elevate the entire community. But it also meant a huge leap forward. A leap into uncharted territory. Are we ready for this? Erica asked, more to herself than to Samuel. Only one way to find out, Samuel replied. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, plans, and research. Erica dug deep into the logistics, the finances, the community needs. She reached out to local business owners, teachers, and residents, gathering their input. What had started as a seed of an idea was growing into something far bigger than she could have imagined. As she spoke with her father more about the idea, she began to see the vision clearly. This wouldn't just be about building new buildings. It would be about creating a culture of self-sufficiency and empowerment. It would be a place where children could learn skills to take with them into the future, where adults could pursue their dreams and businesses could flourish. But it wasn't going to be easy. It would take more than just a plan and good intentions. It would take every ounce of courage and resourcefulness she had learned over the years. There would be pushback, there would be obstacles. But if her father had taught her anything, it was that nothing worthwhile ever came easy. She reached out to key stakeholders, pitched the idea to investors, and built a team of passionate individuals who shared her vision. Every step forward felt like a victory, but there were still doubts, still moments of uncertainty. Would this idea truly work? Could they bring it to life in a way that would make a real difference? Erica stood in the empty lot downtown, the place where their new venture would eventually stand. The city around her buzzed with life, but this space, this blank canvas, felt full of promise. She thought about the families she had met over the years, the ones who had walked through the center's doors, the ones who had dared to dream again. She thought about the young men and women who had found mentors and purpose, and the children who had learned what it meant to hope. She thought about her father's words. It's not about building something for today, Erica. It's about building something that will last. And that's exactly what she planned to do. Erica stands at the threshold of something massive. Will she be able to make this bold new project a reality? What challenges lie ahead as she tries to build a new future for the community? A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Charles Darwin. The meeting room was tense. Erica sat at the head of the long table, her gaze steady but her mind racing. The investors, a mix of skeptical businessmen and curious philanthropists, were waiting for her to present her vision for the new project. She had laid out everything, every detail, every step. But as the minutes ticked by, she could feel the weight of the room pressing in on her. The first question came from a sharp-faced man in a tailored suit. You're asking us to commit significant resources to a project that's untested. There's no guarantee this will succeed. Why should we invest in a concept that hasn't been proven? Erica's heart pounded. She had expected this kind of resistance, but it didn't make it any easier to face. Her response had to be flawless. She took a deep breath, her voice calm but firm. This community has been overlooked for far too long. What we're proposing isn't just another development. It's a paradigm shift. This project will empower individuals, give them the tools they need to succeed. It will generate jobs, foster innovation, and create a sustainable model that can be replicated in other cities. The risk is there, yes, but the potential to change lives and build something lasting far outweighs it. Another investor, a woman with short, graying hair, leaned forward. But how do you plan to deal with the inevitable pushback? People are going to resist change. There will be challenges. You're not just creating something for the community, you're changing the fabric of the area. You'll face political opposition, regulatory hurdles. How do you plan to overcome that? Erica's mind flashed to the countless conversations she'd had with her father. He had taught her that anything worth doing came with its challenges. But it was the way you met those challenges that determined success. I've lived through opposition, she said quietly. I've seen what it's like to be told no, to be told this can't be done. But every time, we found a way. The people here deserve more than just a fight for resources. They deserve a chance to thrive. We're not just building for today. We're building for the future. And that future won't be stopped by a few obstacles. Her words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. The room was still, the investors absorbing what she'd said. Finally, the first investor broke the silence. All right, we're in. But this better not be just talk. We want a return on this investment. Erica nodded, relief flooding her for a moment before her focus sharpened again. You'll see results. I promise you. The next few weeks were a blur. The paperwork, the meetings, the approvals, everything moved at lightning speed. Erica was juggling calls, organizing teams, and ensuring that every detail was in place. There was no time to rest, no time to doubt. Her vision was becoming a reality. But even with all the forward momentum, she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The community had to buy in. Without their support, the project would be nothing more than a shell of a good idea. She needed the people to believe in what she was creating, to see the potential in themselves. Erica stood in the center of the existing community center, looking out over the room filled with parents, children, and residents. The familiar faces were a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. She took the microphone, her voice steady. We've been given an incredible opportunity. This new project is more than just a building. It's a chance for all of us to change the future. Together, we can build something that will last, something that will help you, your families, and the generations to come. The crowd's response was mixed. Some were hopeful, others skeptical. She knew that winning them over wouldn't be easy. She could already hear the murmurs of doubt. But she wasn't about to back down now. You may be wondering, what does this mean for US? Erica continued. It means better schools, better opportunities, better jobs. It means giving your children the tools to succeed and giving you the resources to build the life you deserve. A woman in the front row stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. And what about the people who have nowhere else to turn? What about the ones who are struggling the most? Erica looked directly at her, heart aching for the truth of her words. This project is for everyone. Whether you're struggling or thriving, there's a place here for you. It's not about leaving anyone behind. It's about lifting everyone up. The room fell silent. It was a moment of truth, a moment where Erica had to prove that her dream was real, that her commitment was more than just words. And, as she met the eyes of the people in the room, she knew that this was just the beginning. The project has officially launched, but there's still much to be done. Will Erica's vision for a new future be embraced by the community, or will she face more challenges than she ever anticipated? You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Zig Ziglar. The weeks that followed the community meeting were filled with anticipation. Erica threw herself into every aspect of the project, working tirelessly with contractors, city planners, and community leaders. It was a juggernaut in motion, and Erica was determined to make sure it didn't lose momentum. But no matter how hard she worked, there were always new challenges. The more progress they made, the more obstacles seemed to emerge. Local politicians, many of whom had initially expressed support, began pulling back. Some were concerned about how the project would impact their own agendas. Others, from wealthier parts of the city, saw it as a threat to their influence. Erica's phone buzzed as she sat in her office, a cup of cold coffee forgotten on her desk. It was a message from her father, Mark. They're trying to block it at the council meeting tomorrow. You need to be ready. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. The council meeting. The one where the project's fate would be decided. Everything they'd worked for, every sleepless night, every phone call, every piece of paperwork, could come crashing down. Erica glanced at the clock. She didn't have much time. Her mind raced, searching for a solution, but nothing seemed clear. She had the facts, the data, the support from the community, but none of it seemed to be enough. How could she convince these politicians that this project wasn't just a dream, but a necessity? That it wasn't just her vision, it was the community's hope? She dialed her father's number, her hands trembling slightly. When he picked up, she didn't wait for pleasantries. "They're going to try to kill it," she said, her voice tight. Mark sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of frustration. "I figured as much. They'll always try to protect their own interests. But this is bigger than that, Erica. You know it is." "I don't know if I can do it," Erica admitted, her voice small. "I'm running out of time. I've done everything I can, and it still might not be enough." There was a pause on the other end of the line, before her father spoke again, softer now. "You're stronger than you think. You've come this far, and you're not about to let them win now. Just remember why you started. Don't lose sight of that." Erica closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself in his words. She had started this journey because she believed in the future of this community. She believed in the people here, their strength, their resilience. She had to remember that. The next morning, Erica arrived at the city council chambers early. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel the weight of the decision that was about to unfold. The chamber was packed with residents, all eagerly waiting to hear what would happen. As she made her way to the front, she saw familiar faces. People who had supported her, who had stood with her through the long days of planning. She nodded at them, giving them a small smile, but inside, the uncertainty gnawed at her. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but it didn't take long for the tension to escalate. One by one, council members began speaking out against the project. Some cited the potential for rising costs. Others claimed it would disrupt the existing community structure. The criticisms were valid, but they felt personal to Erica. Every word felt like an attack on the vision she had fought for. Then, it was her turn. She stood, straightening her back, her heart pounding in her chest. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, but she pushed it aside. This wasn't about them. It was about the people she had promised to fight for. Erica stepped to the podium, her voice steady as she began. "I've heard the concerns. I understand them. This project isn't easy, and I know it's going to be difficult. But sometimes, the right thing isn't the easy thing. We are talking about changing lives here. We are talking about giving people the opportunity to thrive when they've been told their entire lives that they're not enough. This project is a chance for all of us to show the world that we believe in the future of this community." She paused, scanning the room. The council members were listening now, their faces unreadable. "I'm not asking for a favor," Erica continued. "I'm asking for a chance to prove that we can do this together. A chance to build something that will last long after we're gone." The room remained quiet for a moment, and Erica could feel the weight of their decision hanging in the air. Would they stand in the way of progress? Or would they make the hard choice for the future? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the council members spoke. "I think we can work with you, Erica. Let's revisit some of the concerns, but we're not giving up on this. Not yet." A wave of relief washed over her. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a start. Erica has made it through the council meeting, but the real fight is only beginning. The community is still divided, and the future of the project is far from certain. Can she unite them all and prove that her vision is worth fighting for? Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. The following weeks were a blur of frantic meetings, late nights, and unyielding pressure. Erica's resolve had only hardened in the wake of the council's decision to table the vote. It was a temporary reprieve, but it was far from a guarantee. She knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The community's support remained strong, But doubts lingered. Some still feared the disruption the project might cause. Others, emboldened by the council's hesitation, began to voice their opposition more loudly. The city's wealthier residents, those with the most influence, didn't want to see their neighborhoods affected. The stakes were higher than ever, and Erica felt the weight of every decision. One evening, as she sat in her office with a pile of papers spread out before her, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father. "The rally's tomorrow. You've got this, Erica. But remember, they can't stop us if we keep pushing." His words echoed in her mind as she stared at the papers in front of her. This rally, an event designed to demonstrate the community's unwavering support, was her last chance to show the council that the people were behind her. If it fell flat, the project would lose its momentum. But if it succeeded, if the crowd turned out in full force, it could change everything. The night before the rally, Erica walked through the empty streets of her neighborhood, her mind racing. She could see the project in her mind: the affordable housing, the community center, the park for children to play in. She saw the faces of the people who would benefit, people she knew personally, people who had shared their dreams with her. She could feel their hope. She couldn't let that go. The next day, the streets were alive with energy. People from all over the city gathered in front of the community center, holding signs, chanting, and talking to each other. Erica arrived early, watching as volunteers and supporters set up. She could already feel the power of the moment building. This was more than just a rally. It was a declaration that the future of the community wasn't up for debate. By the time the rally began, the crowd had grown large, bigger than Erica had hoped. People of all ages, races, and backgrounds stood together, united in their cause. It was a sight to behold, a visual representation of what the project could mean. Erica took the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. She scanned the crowd, taking in the faces of those who had come to stand beside her. This wasn't just a fight for one person or one project. It was a fight for the future of the entire community. She had to remind them of that. She had to make them see how far they had come and how far they could go. "Today, we stand together," Erica's voice rang out, clear and strong. "We are not just fighting for a building, a structure. We are fighting for a future where every person, no matter their background, has a chance. A future where the doors are open to everyone and no one is left behind." The crowd cheered, and for the first time in weeks, Erica felt a surge of hope. She wasn't alone. The city wasn't alone. They were all in this together. She continued, her words gaining strength with every sentence. "This project isn't just mine. It's all of ours. It's for the single mothers who are struggling to make ends meet. It's for the kids who deserve to grow up in a place where they feel safe and valued. It's for every person who's been told their dreams are too big, too far-fetched. It's time for us to prove them wrong." The crowd erupted into applause, and Erica felt the electricity in the air. The momentum was shifting. As the rally came to a close, people gathered in small groups, talking excitedly, rallying around the cause. It was clear that the tide was turning in their favor. But there was still work to be done. The council meeting loomed large on the horizon. She couldn't afford to relax, not yet. The next day, the city council reconvened. The room was filled to capacity. Erica entered, standing tall as she made her way to the front. She looked out at the faces in the room, some skeptical, some hopeful, and others, like the mayor, who remained neutral. But today, Erica knew the outcome would be different. As the discussions began, she felt the energy shift. One by one, council members who had previously been opposed to the project began to speak out in its favor. The rally had done its job. It had shown them the true will of the people. When it came time for Erica to speak, she felt no fear, only resolve. She stepped up to the podium, her voice strong and unwavering. "This project is not just a dream. It is the future," she began, her words carrying the weight of everything she had fought for. "The people of this community have spoken. We have shown up, and we will continue to show up, because we believe in what we are building. This is not just about one neighborhood or one group of people. This is about all of us, together." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions softening. It was clear, they were listening now. After a tense silence, the mayor spoke, his voice measured. I think we've heard enough. I propose we move forward with the project. The room erupted into applause. Erica stood there, a wave of relief and triumph washing over her. It wasn't over yet, but the victory was theirs. Erica's fight is far from over. The project has been approved, but now it's time to put the plan into action. Can she keep the momentum going and ensure the vision becomes a reality for the community? The months following the approval of the community project were nothing short of transformative. Erica's efforts were just the beginning, but the hard work had paid off. The groundbreaking ceremony was a day of celebration, but it was also a reminder of all the obstacles that had been overcome. The fight hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over yet. But with every brick that was laid, with every new structure that rose, Erica felt the weight of their shared journey lift just a little more. In the early stages, the work seemed endless. The city's residents, eager to see the change they had fought for, came together once again. This time not to rally, but to build. Volunteers painted walls, planted trees, and constructed playgrounds. The community was shaping its own future, brick by brick, and it felt more powerful than Erica had ever imagined. She often found herself walking the site in the quiet moments of the morning, before the bustle of work began. The city was slowly transforming, and so was she. The doubt and uncertainty that had once clouded her thoughts had faded, replaced by a clear vision of what the future held. The housing units were taking shape, each one a testament to the perseverance and belief of the people who had fought for it. And the community center, where once there had been an empty lot, now stood proudly, a symbol of hope, of resilience. But it wasn't just the physical buildings that had changed. The community had transformed as well. People who had once felt disconnected, isolated by their circumstances, were now coming together in ways Erica had never expected. The elderly gathered at the community center, children played in the new park, and families moved into their new homes, finding stability and security they had long dreamed of. At one of the first events held at the community center, a celebration of the project's completion, Erica stood at the podium once more. She looked out over the crowd, her heart full. There were no words that could fully capture the depth of what they had accomplished together. But she tried anyway. "This," she said, her voice breaking the silence, "this is what happens when we refuse to give up, when we believe in each other. This is just the beginning of something beautiful, something that will last for generations." The crowd erupted in applause, but Erica's gaze shifted to the families and individuals standing around her, the real success stories. She knew the work wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, still battles to fight. But for the first time, Erica knew they could face them together. As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow over the new buildings and the people who had fought for them, Erica smiled. She had done what she set out to do. She had changed lives. And in the process, she had changed her own. As the community thrives, Erica looks forward to the future with hope, knowing that true change is built not just in brick and mortar, but in the hearts of those who dare to dream.